In the 1890s, everyone was getting themselves new armoured cruisers, and the Italians were no exception. Thus far, their previous two attempts had been somewhat lacklustre, coming in somewhat small and armed with only broadside 6-inch guns, which left the fore and aft extreme arcs uncovered, and by the standards of the day, also lacking the heavy killing power of large guns that were thought to be needed to quickly dispatch smaller craft or finish off a peer opponent. For contrast, the British armoured cruisers had settled on a pattern of having a pair of 9.2-inch guns and 10 single 6-inch guns at a displacement level where the Italian ships had only managed to equip a dozen 6-inch guns, and most other armoured cruisers followed some kind of similar gun layout. The Italians decided to rectify this situation with a slightly larger design than their previous efforts, under the guidance of Edoardo Masdea. A vessel would begin to take shape that would end up being a huge commercial success. Indeed, Argentina and Spain would actually receive ships ordered to this type before the Italian Navy itself, and Japan would get a couple of orders in as well, somewhat afterwards. However, this would lead to something of a nightmare when it comes to working out the weapons equipped on any given ship of the class, since it varied massively. Whilst all the ships could reach about 19 to 20 knots on somewhere between 13 and 14,000 shaft horsepower, which drove 2 screws, and all of them would have a belt of 5.9-inch maximum thickness, the similarities pretty much ended there. For a start, the 4 Argentine and 1 Spanish ship were all built to the original hull plan. The Italian and Japanese ships were built to a slightly larger one that stretched the hull with an extra hull segment added, which also increased displacement by about 600 tons, leading the ships to go from just over 6,800 tons to around 7,500 tons, give or take a bit, depending again on the exact weapons loadout. The first ship, the Argentine ARA Garibaldi, established a baseline armament of 2 single 10-inch guns, 1 fore and 1 aft, along with 10 single 6-inch guns, 5 per side, 6 single 4.7-inch guns, 10 single 57mm guns, 8 single 37mm guns, and 4 torpedo tubes. However, the subsequent General Belgrano and Pueyrredon, I think, would change this, increasing the 6-inch guns to 14 at the expense of dropping the 4.7-inch guns, and adding a couple of 3-inch guns as well with the sum of the saved displacement. Meanwhile, the San Martin would have the same lesser batteries as Garibaldi, but mounted a pair of twin 8-inch turrets instead of a single 10-inch fore and aft. Confused yet? The Spanish vessel that was completed, Cristobal Colon, was supposed to have the 2 single 10-inch guns, but they hadn't actually been installed by the time that she was sunk in the Spanish-American War. The 3 Italian ships, Giuseppe Garibaldi, Francesco Ferruccio, and Varese, were of the newer enlarged design, and then at least had the decency to be consistent, mounting a single 10-inch gun forward, a twin 8-inch gun turret aft, 14 single 6-inch, 10 single 3-inch, 6 single 47mm, and 4 torpedo tubes. 2 final ships were under construction for Italy, but were sold to Argentina in response to the Chilean order of 2 small battleships from the UK. The UK then negotiated a disarmament treaty that saw the battleships enter UK service as the Swiftsures, and the armoured cruisers were sold on again to Japan as Kasuga and Nishin, with the former having the same weapons as the Italian vessels, but the latter having the same pair of twin 8-inch turrets as the San Martin. Yeah, they had a lot of different gun variants. As you might expect, the class had wildly varying careers. Cristobal Colon would be one of 2 ships lost in action, as mentioned earlier, falling to the US Navy during the Spanish-American War. The Italian ships would see action against the Ottomans in the oft-forgotten Italo-Turkish War of 1911, sinking an old Ottoman ironclad in the course of shore bombardment missions. It was on a similar mission in World War I that Giuseppe Garibaldi would be the other ship to be lost, falling to the Austro-Hungarian SMU-4 in 1915. The other 2 ships would survive the war, becoming training ships and then being taken out of service during the first half of the interwar period. The two Japanese ships would arguably have the most exciting lives, taking part in the Russo-Japanese War in general and the Battle of Tsushima in particular, where Nishin took a severe pounding, which cost a young ensign Yamamoto 2 fingers, and the ship most of its main battery. Both ships would however survive to be disarmed and turned into training ships after World War I. Nishin would then be sunk as a target in 1936, but later raised and used as a target again, this time by the Yamato herself, which then sent her back to the bottom for a second and final time. Kasuga was used for various transport and training roles before becoming an accommodation vessel and sunk in 1945 during a US air raid. But it was to be the Argentine ships which would be the last standing. Whilst their careers were relatively uneventful compared to the other Navy's vessels, the Garibaldi and San Martin were scrapped in the 1930s. General Belgrano and Pueyrredon would survive past World War II, with the former going out of service in 1947 and the latter lasting until no less than 1954, before becoming the last of the class to go to the breakers.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.